Swami Vedananda has been very instrumental in leading Vedanta-based discussions every Sunday, right here in the room across in the circle seminar room. We have Sanskrit classes, we have philosophy discussions based on Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, we have some devotional singing. So this is all Swami Vedananda's very long connection with Stanford, and this program has been going on at least for 15 to 20 years, and Swami Vedananda will give us the exact history. Many of us would have been like doing high school. Anyway, and I would invite Swami Vedananda to introduce Swami Tattwamayananda. The title of Swami Tattwamayananda's lecture is going to be Vedanta as a new religious paradigm for the modern world.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have this function every year. And as you know, this function has two parts. One is a reception in the Stanford Memorial Church, which will take place next Sunday, in which about 8 different spiritual organizations on campus each take part. And the Hindu Students' Council is part of that effort. It's organized by the Office of Religious Life and the deans that are in charge of that. And as part of that, each organization, each spiritual organization, holds a meeting like this to discuss more at length the doctrines and beliefs and practices of its faith. And this is the Hindu Students' Council reception to fulfill that function. And today we're very honored to have Swami Tattwamayananda here as our guest. He has come for several years now, ever since he has come to this country. When this function has been held, he has been invited to present an aspect of Vedanta philosophy and Vedanta religion. He has a lifelong training and experience in spiritual knowledge, spiritual study, spiritual experience, and in guiding classes of spiritual aspirants. He has also a literary education, in addition to a thorough Sanskrit traditional education. He also has studied modern European philosophy, and so he's very, very well qualified to bridge the gap between what religion teaches and the way different religions have been practiced and different nations have evolved in this world. So he has both a modern and a very traditional education. He has been editor of the Malayalam edition of a magazine in the Malayalam language from the state of Kerala in South India. And he has also been head of a large educational institution that the Ramakrishna Mission, to which we belong, has established in the northeast of the country, in the area of Cherrapunji. So he has had, and also the training center for brahmacharis, for aspiring monks at Belur Math, which is the headquarters of our order. He has taught there for a number of years, so he's extremely well versed in both traditional and in modern philosophy, religion, and spirituality. So his topic today involves the integration. His topic today is very similar to a topic that he has chosen for a series of lectures which the Vedanta Society is organizing in Sunnyvale in the South Bay on the second Sunday of each month. We have started a program of lectures, and the general topic is integrating spirituality into daily life, using the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And the first installment of this series took place last month, and it will continue. The next installment is on May 13th, and it's held at the Sunnyvale Community Center. So the Swami is very active in many roles, especially the role of being in charge of the Vedanta Society in San Francisco. And it is my great pleasure to introduce him to you today.
It's always a joy, a pleasure, and an honor to come to this university and to discuss with you, the students of Vedanta, certain aspects of this ancient spiritual philosophical doctrine. So one may very well wonder how Vedanta, which is a very ancient spiritual tradition, could be called a religious paradigm for our times. And when you talk about religion, as you all know, there is a lot of unpleasantness associated with the very name religion in modern times. Religion is not always at fault, but the way religion was practiced, or perhaps better to say not actually practiced, by those who are supposed to profess and practice religion. So as a result of this, you hear a lot of criticism against religion in modern times. There are many wonderful people in today's world, great humanists, not necessarily atheists, but humanists, who point a finger at religion for many of the evils that we are confronting in today's world. Before 20th century, most of the great wars were fought in the name of religion and on behalf of God. In the name of religion, a lot of injustices were practiced, a lot of cruelties were practiced, a lot of unpleasantness happened during the last 2000 years of the history of religious thought. So how can a religion be a new paradigm for our times? Well, when you talk about Vedanta, what I want to emphasize at the very beginning of my talk is that Vedanta is not just another religion. Vedanta is essentially the essence of all the universal spiritual and humanistic ideas that are found in all the scriptures of the world. If you read the teachings of the great founders of world religions, or if you read the great holy scriptures representing different religious traditions, you find there are two types of teachings. One, the universal teachings, teachings which are relevant, which are practical, which are important for the whole humanity. Not only to those who profess the particular religious doctrine, but for the whole humanity. Even you find many great ideas spread out all over the religious teachings of the major religious faith systems of the world, teachings which are important even for those who do not believe in God. And that's a very important point to remember when we discuss Vedanta. You'll be surprised when I tell you that Vedanta accommodates even those who do not believe in God. So I have to emphasize this point. What do we mean by not belief in God? Even those who refuse to believe in a God who creates this world, in a God who sits above the clouds, a God who promises heaven to His followers, to those who worship Him according to one particular doctrine, and promises rewards to those who accept Him. You need not believe in such a God to be a Vedanti. And that's a very unique doctrine of Vedanta. So Vedanta, on one hand, it focuses on the universal teachings of all great religious traditions of the world. In all religious doctrines, all religious books, you find certain teachings which are universal, which are relevant for all times, which, as I mentioned earlier, can be practiced even by those who do not believe in God. I can just quote one statement from Vivekananda, who happens to be the founder of the monastic order that I belong to. The statement is this: you live your life in such a way that God will accept you even if you do not accept God. In fact, in a way, that will make clear to you why Vedanta is considered to be a new religious doctrine. This idea which I am explaining right now, it was repeated by great historians like Arnold Toynbee, great historians like Robertson, even great agnostics like Richard Dawkins, who are not willing to accept the established religions of the world, but who are willing to accept the humanism in Buddha, or humanism in Christ, or humanism in Gandhi, or the Vedic teachings. Even such great humanists who do not actually belong to the tradition of conservative theistic faith systems, even in their teachings you find this echoes of Vedanta. So what is Vedanta? Vedanta focuses on the universal, humanistic and spiritual teachings that could be found in the Bible. For example, you find some very wonderful teachings in the parables of Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, and many of those teachings you find. And you find the same great teachings in the Dhammapada, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Upanishads, and the mystical traditions of different other religious systems. So Vedanta focuses on these ideas, the universal, the spiritual, and the humanistic teachings. Then why is religion at fault, according to the critics of religious systems? As I mentioned, when you talk about religion, you hear a lot of criticism of the Inquisition, the genocides, the crusades, or the casteism in India, the untouchability, many of the social injustices practiced by many of the Oriental religious traditions. Of course, along with, you hear a lot about apartheid. I mentioned the massacres of the inquisitions and the crusades and so on. Now, according to Vedanta, these problems are not actually the problems of those religions. These problems are the problems of misinterpretations of those religious doctrines. So, in every religious tradition, there are certain secondary details. Secondary details means socio-anthropological, cultural factors which are associated with all these religious prophets. To give an example, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, if you read the Upanishads, or if you read the Bible, if you read the Dhammapada, you find, see, Christ, Jesus parables are set in the traditional rural Judeo-Christian Palestinian cultural landscape. So the parables are naturally drawn, the parables, the imageries, the illustrations, the examples, the stories are all taken from that particular background. If you read the Dhammapada, for example, if you read the Jataka tales in Buddhist tradition, many of those tales and examples are drawn from the cultural landscape of, let's say, 6th century BC India. So also you find in Jewish tradition, which again taken from the Judeo-Christian, the cultural landscape of Middle East. So in these illustrations, stories and parables, there are many factors which are cultural factors, socio-anthropological customs. So every prophet has to use a language or a vocabulary in which he is born, to which he is born. And he has to preach to people of his own tribal tradition, tribal background, who speak one particular language. And they need a set of imageries and illustrations of that particular cultural tradition. That is one limitation, one burden. So every prophet in a way is a product of his culture. And he also gives shape to a new paradigm. He gives shape to a new paradigm which he hands over to the next generation. So now the point is, when you read the teachings of great religious traditions, you should look beyond the socio-anthropological aspects of the religious doctrines. And you have to focus on the universal teachings, the spiritual teachings of those prophets, of the religious traditions. When you focus on them, you find every religion, every prophet, every religious teacher asks you, demands you to be basically a good human being. So to be spiritual is to become a genuine human being. Because humanism, spiritual humanism, is the essence of Vedanta. So in Vedantic tradition, there is an evolution taking place at both levels. As we evolve in our spiritual life, our understanding of definition of the highest absolute reality, our understanding of God evolves. See, a primitive person, a primitive man or woman who is not spiritually evolved may think, well, my God lives in a temple or a church, a particular place of worship. He'll be very happy if I bow down before him. And he'll be terribly unhappy if I do not bow down before him, or if I worship God of a different tradition. It's a kind of capricious, jealous God. That's how a primitive person interprets his God. That God is terribly unhappy if he deviates from his doctrines, even the slightest extent. This is not wrong according to Vedanta. You can't tell a kindergarten child, oh, you are wrong. what you are studying is all wrong. You should go to Stanford. That's the real place for education. You don't tell that to a kindergarten child. So what we will do, you tell him, you work hard, get a good grade, then you go to school called City College or Stanford or Oxford, depending upon the background. So also Vedanta tells you, even if you interpret God in your own way, which may be a very primitive way, there is nothing wrong in it. But you should go beyond that. And as we evolve in our own spiritual life, our understanding of God also changes. Slowly we begin to feel, well, God is not such a capricious, jealous person who sits above the clouds, dividing mankind into conflicting groups of believers and non-believers, threatening non-believers with damnation or hellfire, or promising heavens to believers. There is a higher understanding of God. And gradually, as he becomes more and more humane, more and more spiritual, his interpretation, his understanding of God also becomes more spiritual. And at the highest level of the spiritual growth, he is able to see the presence of God outside the place of worship. He is able to see the presence of God outside the temple, outside the church, or outside the place of worship. He won't require a priest. He won't require an intermediary to communicate with God, because he feels the presence of God everywhere. He feels that the permanent residential address of God is our own heart. God is sitting in your hearts. So this is a matter of evolution at the level of the spiritual seeker and also at the level of the concept of God. This is what Vedanta tells you. So you begin with external rituals. So I may believe that I should read my scripture. That's very important for me. And then I may find justification for reading the scriptures. And then I may evolve a philosophical system on the basis of these scriptural teachings. So rituals, mythology and philosophy, these are three levels of evolution at the early part of our spiritual life. But Vedanta tells you the highest reach, the peak of spiritual evolution, not only in Vedanta or Hinduism, but in all traditions, is the experience of the presence of God everywhere and the presence of God within us. When we feel the presence of God within us, then we are able to see, and not only just to believe in, but to experience the presence of God everywhere. So this approach can be applied even in a technology-obsessed society, even in a what you call materialistic society, because Vedanta bridges the secular with the spiritual. Vedanta doesn't divide our life into fragments. So normally in traditional religious faith systems, whether Hinduism or Buddhism or Christianity, Judaism, all traditions, we often divide life into secular and spiritual. So we look upon, let's say, reading Holy Scripture, prayer, meditation as something spiritual, and working in an office or studying in a university or teaching in a university, we may sometimes look upon this as something not spiritual but secular. Vedanta tells you even our secular activities can become spiritual activities. How? When we look upon all our activities as spiritual activities. So when whatever we do, if we do with a total unselfishness, without any selfish motive, that activity becomes a spiritual activity. It's called, work can become worship. Worship again doesn't necessarily mean a technical act, an act of worshipping in a temple or a church. That is only a very limited, very gross sense in which the word is used. Worship can mean anything you do with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. So, at the level of our individual spiritual journey, whatever we do can become an act of worship. Whatever we speak can become something sacred. So the whole life, what you call the so-called secular life, can be spiritualized. So at an individual level, Vedanta helps you to bring spirituality into our daily life. And one important point that I want to emphasize again and again is, this is not limited to Hinduism. So I want to, because it needs some introduction, some formal statements, Vedanta philosophy, the word itself, I'm not going to the etymological description. Vedanta means the last peak of knowledge, realization or experience. There have been Vedantins in all religious traditions. We call them mystics. Those who are left behind rituals, mythology and philosophy and reach the experience level, then you find that's the highest reach of spiritual evolution. In some of our scriptures, there are statements like this. See, those who go to a temple and worship in that temple, but those who cannot feel the presence of God outside the temple, they are only kindergarten children in spiritual life. So, I would, for those of you who are interested, I can quote, but I should explain. Archayam eva hare pujam sasadhi kude nasatad bhakteshu sanneshu yakarudi saprakritaka. This is the literal Sanskrit verse, an ancient verse, but it means, says there is a discussion, who is the highest devotee of God? Who is a real person, really speaking, who is a truly religious person? So, a discussion between a king and a group of sages. So, one of the sages says that those who go to a temple and see the presence of God inside the temple, but refuse to see the presence of the same God outside the place of worship, those who define religion just as a mechanical act of a ritual or a pilgrimage, they are only kindergarten children in spiritual evolution. Then who is a truly religious person? It says, Sarva Bhudeshu ye paschet bhagavad bhavam atmanaha bhudani bhagavadi atmani esha bhagavadottamaka. Is an interesting definition of who is a truly religious person. Now, remember, when you read this, when you understand the meaning, you find such men and women were born in all religious traditions, and even among traditions which were really not religious. You can be spiritual without being religious. You can be spiritual even without formally professing any established religious tradition. That's what this verse says. It says, those who see the presence of God everywhere and in everything, in everybody, and those who see the presence of the whole humanity in God, he is truly, or he or she is a truly evolved person. Such a human being cannot do harm to anybody, because he looks upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family. So, in some of our commentators, like Shankaracharya says, you can't do harm to another person, you can't hurt another person. Because you won't hit your own head with your right hand. You will feel the pain. By hurting another person, we are spiritually hurting ourselves. In other words, looking upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family and looking upon everyone as an expression of one divine reality. This is the essence of Vedanta. Remember, in this context, what's the nature of God, you may very well ask. I may go to a temple and worship. You may go to a church or a synagogue. Like that, depending upon the tradition that we are born into. That's all fine. But as we evolve in our spiritual life, as we reach a higher stage in our own spiritual journey, then at one point, love, compassion, broad-mindedness, unselfishness, the basic human qualities become natural to us. Not something to be imbibed or professed, but something that becomes our true nature. At that stage, we can be religious even without going to a place of worship. That's what is becoming spiritual. So religious in the limited sense of the word religion is something that is very limited by its very nature. Because religion, religion can be defined as spirituality. Religion can also and frequently was defined as rituals, external practices. If you define religion as external practices, it is not going to be a paradigm for the times in which we are living, because religion divides humanity. Religion divides, it creates conflicts. Religion creates friction, wars, bloodshed. It did happen, it's still happening, and it will happen in future. But same religion, when you define as spirituality, as feeling and experiencing the presence of God everywhere, as looking upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family, then the same religion becomes spirituality. We call it spiritual humanism. So, religion as spiritual humanism is Vedanta, and it can be accepted by all traditions. Now, in fact, this also incidentally happens to be a universal spiritual ethical philosophy. You don't hurt another person, not because God will punish you, but because by hurting another person, you are hurting yourself. You don't want to hurt yourself. So, this feeling of the oneness or unity of creation and existence is the essence of Vedanta. Incidentally, this idea of unity and identification with others goes even beyond human beings, even hurting an animal, cutting down a tree, polluting the water, polluting the air and skies, is also an unspiritual act according to some of the great teachings of Vedanta. So there are Dev Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Apashanti, Oshadaya Shanti, Vanaspadaya Shanti. You find the Shanti mantra is found in Yajurvedic tradition and also Rigvedic tradition. You know what it means? Let the earth, the sky, the waters, the mountains, the clouds, let all these things, natural phenomena, remain pure and let them bring peace and happiness. Madhuvada Hridayade Madhuksharandi Sindhavaga. You find such Madhvi Santoshadhi. Let trees and mountains, air and water, let them remain pure and sweet and useful for humanity. So, looking upon the whole existence, not only human beings, the whole existence as one spiritual family, as one spiritual entity is the essence of Vedanta. So maybe this Vedantic doctrine paradigm can be the only paradigm perhaps that may survive in course of time, because as human beings evolve more and more and become better educated, they may not believe they may not accept a religion that is essentially divisive, that asks you to believe blindly in the doctrines of some books written maybe thousands of years back. Rational people may not be willing to accept it. But then everyone will accept that you should not pollute water, air and water. You should not hurt another person. You'll be hurting yourself. You cannot do harm to another person. Not because God will put you in hellfire, rather by doing another person harm, you are doing harm to yourself. So this idea of universal spiritual oneness and unity is the essence of Vedantic doctrine. At the individual level, it helps you to translate all our activities, to transform all our activities into something spiritual. So it constructs a bridge between the spiritual and the secular. Even the grossest spiritual activity can become even the grossest secular activity can become a spiritual activity. Work can become worship. So at the very beginning, we may, as I mentioned earlier, we may divide work and worship, secular and spiritual. And then perhaps at an advanced stage, we may be able to do our secular work as spiritual work. I mean, work as worship. At highest level, only worship remains. Everything becomes a spiritual activity. So at the individual level, it evolves you to grow in your own inner spiritual journey. And at the universal level, it helps you to look upon our fellow human beings, even the animal kingdom, and even the empirical phenomena as one spiritual entity. We all know very well this time, in the Bhagavad Gita there is called a Yajna Chakra concept. It is, it simply says this much, or Brahma Yajna it is called. When you do some harm to, let us say, nature, to give an example, you cut down trees, let's say deforestation. It could cause reduction in rainfall, it could cause famine, misery to humanity. And if you construct a dam across a river, you block the natural flow of water. It could also can upset the balance of the earth, the geological balance. So whatever we do to upset the existing rhythm of nature and life will have some unpleasant consequence. As a price we have to pay for it. In Vedic tradition it is called rhythm. Rhythm is nothing but an invisible sequence of cause and effect, a balancing system. It's called rhythm. The English word rhythm is something, maybe in a way it is linked to that. So rhythm is a kind of internal balancing system, a system of mutual dependence, interdependence, interrelatedness. You may do harm to a person if you may not be able to sleep peacefully that day. The person is hurt and you also are hurt internally. So there's a sequence. This is called rhythm. So when we do something that upsets the existing natural rhythm, it becomes adharma. So there are three words which are interrelated: satyam, rhythm and dharma. In the Rigvedic language, very frequently these are used as synonyms: satyena, rhytena satyena, rhythm cha satyam cha. Frequently they are used with different meaning. Frequently they are used with identical meaning. What it means is this: when you bring into a state of imbalance the existing sequence of nature, you do harm to nature. It is adharma. It is an act of adharma. And It is actually an act of falsehood. We are doing an injustice to nature. Now, this can become a paradigm by itself. It can become a spiritual universal paradigm. It can be accepted even by an agnostic or an atheist. Agnostics and atheists, rationalists and those who are obsessed with technology, but those who have a care for human beings. There are many such people in the world who don't go to any church or a temple or any place of worship. They don't read scriptures. They have very strong things to say about God. Or if God is, I don't have much of admiration for a God who creates such a miserable world. So how do you reconcile a miserable world and a benevolent creator of that world? God is so compassionate. Why should He create such a cruel world with all these natural calamities, injustices, all terrible things that we don't really want to speak about? How do you reconcile a compassionate God and a cruel world, a cruel life? There's no real answer in any of the monotheistic systems, either in Hinduism or Christianity or any traditions which I know of. If you have the concept of a creator God, then there are many people who may not want to live, who may not want to have much to do with such a creator God, because His creation is not so very wonderful. It has many problems. Now, Vedanta tells you, this is not, but Vedanta's great, Vedanta's something unique about it. That is, Vedanta doesn't tell you it is wrong. That's one important aspect of Vedanta. Vedanta never rejects anything as wrong. If your religion is different from my religion, if your approach to God is different from my approach, it doesn't mean that you are wrong, that I am right. It could be another understanding, another definition, another approach, the same reality. So difference doesn't imply that you are wrong. Difference only implies it's a different approach to the same reality. Okay, now coming to the subject. In modern times, suppose you tell a rationalist or a scientist who has some concern for humanity that, see, you need not go to a temple, but you should have concern for the world in which you are living, the earth that you are living on, or the human beings you are living with, you interact with. Every sensible person will accept that. And that is what Vedanta tells you. Vedanta doesn't reject other traditional definitions of God, other Hindu definition or Christian definition or Jewish definition. Vedanta takes you beyond that without rejecting it. There is no conflict, but there is transcendence. As we evolve in spiritual life, our understanding of God goes beyond, but doesn't reject, doesn't conflict with, but the transcendence goes beyond the conventional definitions of religion. When we become spiritual, we become good human beings. We become spiritual when we feel the presence of God, not only in the place of worship, but also outside the place of worship. So spirituality becomes a matter of daily contact, daily experience, and daily life. This is one of the reasons. There are many important points which I can discuss perhaps during interaction when you ask questions. I can explain much more, but the essence of Vedanta is that it is a universal spiritual paradigm. It helps you on the one hand to feel the presence of God outside religion, outside the scriptures, outside a temple or a church or any place of worship, and it helps you to communicate with the divine reality that is present everywhere. So one important point is it doesn't reject anything, it doesn't stand in conflict of anything, rather it goes beyond it. That's one uniqueness of Vedanta. Now you can have interaction. I would be very happy to respond to your questions. Most welcome. I may have left out many points, so I may get a chance to explain those points during the interaction. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's okay. Thank you for giving us this brief introduction about Vedanta. I never knew that it is actually a religion. I thought it is a society. But probably both are the same now that I say it. You claim that the essence of Vedanta is found in all religions.
Yeah.
In Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism,
Everywhere.
Islam,
Yeah.
Judaism. So, can you tell if Vedanta has any differences with any of these religions?
Well, as I mentioned to you, the word, I shall explain what is Vedanta. The word itself means Vedanam Antaha, Vedasya Antaha. So Veda means knowledge. Knowledge doesn't mean scholarship, acquaintance with ideas. Knowledge means real knowledge through experience. Knowledge not by intellectual conviction, but knowledge through experience. That's the vid dhatu. It's a Sanskrit language. Root means is realization, experience. Anta has got two meanings. One is the essence. Second, the last word, the conclusion. In fact, more or less it means the same thing. So what is Vedanta? Vedanta is the ultimate peak of spiritual experience. Your question is very relevant. I shall try to explain this with the help of an illustrational analogy. Suppose, let us say, you are trying to climb the top of a hill. You reach the top of the hill. After reaching the top of the hill, you look downward. Then you find there are so many roads, so many trails that people are taking to reach the same place which you have reached. But when you are taking the trail with the intention of reaching the top of the hill, you may not see other hikers.
Yes.
You may think my road is only road, and the only traveler, and the only pilgrim. But when you reach the top of the hill, then when you look downward, you find there are so many roads, so many trails that people are taking. They are all trying to reach the same place which you have reached. Now, the question is, what is the top of the hill? Experience is the top of the hill. If you read the works of Meister Eckhart, who was a German mystic, whose teachings closely resemble Shankaracharya's teachings. In fact, I had an opportunity to publish serialized an article, a doctorate thesis written originally by a Jesuit priest in German who spent 17 years in Germany, who wrote a thesis comparing Eckhart's philosophy with the Shankaracharya's philosophy, mostly on the basis of Gita Bhashya. Now, Eckhart lived around 13th century. Shankara lived in 8th century. There are many statements which are strikingly similar, almost identical. Like, for example, his concept of the super being, the idea that goes beyond the Trinity. He talks about a kind of super state, higher state, where you cannot define or describe God, you can only experience the reality of God. Now, Anubhavaika Vidyam, Avanmanasa Vocharam, Panja Shabda Pravritti Nishedha, these are important concepts in Advaita Vedanta. You know what it means? God can only be experienced, cannot be seen with your eyes. When you feel the presence of God in your heart, then simultaneously you feel the presence of the same God as a divine spirit everywhere. And that's the top of the hill. This is called the experience. So if you read the autobiographical writings of Saint Teresa of Avila, or if you read the Philokalia, the great masters of Russian Orthodox Church, you find in many of the teachings this universal spiritual humanism, which goes beyond faith as narrowly defined in the different churches of different traditions. When God becomes a matter of your own inner experience. Not that He's standing in front of you with a mighty muzzle like a hound. No. Rather, it becomes, the presence of God becomes a matter of your own experience. Then you become silent. So what is the language of experience? Silence. If you drink that coffee, if somebody asks you, how was the coffee? Wonderful. But you can really convince him how wonderful it was only by offering him a cup of coffee. You can write a book where you'll be convinced. So even at the grossest level of our human experience can only be defined or explained through experience or by experience, not by explanation. You find such ideas in Eckhart mysticism. He was forgotten, he was practically buried, and he was revived only by Rudolf Otto, who wrote great reputations of Eckhartian theology later. Okay, please.
So you spoke about like Adharma in terms of like our relationship with nature,
Yeah.
and how it's important to respect nature.
Yeah.
But sometimes I have this question that, I mean, as a civilization, we have, from a really long time, we have been changing nature for so-called, for our survival.
Yeah.
And I mean, it seems to be more and more the case that, I mean, we have a solution which we think helps many people, but then later on we find that it has some issues. So, I mean, in terms of a practical solution, what should be the guiding principle behind that? Like, what is the right way to live in today's society?
So the only way out is to remind ourselves of these great teachings by holding programs, conferences, discussions among educated people like this. That's the only way. There are many undesirable ideas floating around in the name of God and religion. There are wonderful gems, wonderful teachings in the scriptures, which people tend to forget or ignore or be indifferent to. So the only way out is to have more platforms for discussing these real teachings of true religion. Again, remember, you should not get away with the impression I am an evangelist. I am not preaching for Vedanta. I am not trying to convert anybody to Vedanta. That's a very important point to remember. Vedanta, you become a true Vedantin when you accept these fundamental, universal, humanistic teachings of your own tradition, whatever that tradition may be, or even if you do not believe in God or any religion, still you can be Vedantin by accepting these broad, universal, humanistic ideas. In fact, that's one of the unique teachings of Vedanta. But again, it doesn't reject, it takes you to have a higher look, to look beyond the apparent contradictions. So, if you look beyond and behind these apparent contradictions, you find in all religious traditions some universal, unifying, humanistic, spiritualizing teachings. That's what Vedanta is focusing on.
I want
anyone
else to talk? No, go ahead. I want to extend that.
Quick follow-up to your question. Swamiji, Vedanta has its root in Hinduism, but even in Hinduism, we talk about Swarga a lot, right?
We talk about?
Heaven.
Oh yeah.
So can you, I can understand when other religions talk about it, but if the root of Hinduism is...
Human beings are same everywhere, The basic human aspiration, desires are the same everywhere. Normal human beings, we all human beings, people want comforts, enjoyments, things of this world. That's natural. But you find these higher seekers, spiritual aspirants in all traditions. So that's why Vedanta, see, historically, Vedanta happens to be the highest evolute or the highest peak of Hindu spiritual evolution, philosophical evolution. But Vedanta, on the other hand, has another dimension. You find Vedantic teachings in every tradition. Wherever so great mystics, great teachers, they speak about the direct experience of the divine everywhere. Whenever you reach the level of experience, you are entering the realm of Vedanta. That's what it is. And the experience is possible in all religious traditions. I would tell you, even there were many great spiritual personalities who did not believe in God, who did not go to any place of worship. That's why great teachers like Shankaracharya in modern times, Vivekananda says, true spirituality means accepting and practicing these great teachings. Broad-mindedness, unselfishness, love and compassion for the whole humanity. Buddha, for example, did not believe in God. Though his followers made him into mighty big God, but he did not believe in God. He did not reject God as people frequently try to assert, but he did not affirm faith in a creator God. And he is considered to be one of the greatest spiritual teachers the world has ever produced. That's all. You wanted to ask something?
I want to give others a chance.
Okay, yeah, any of you are most welcome. Yeah, please.
So per my very novice understanding, Vedanta is still based on many of the same scriptures that form the foundation of Hinduism.
Yeah.
Yet you sort of characterize it as this evolution in the philosophy.
Yeah.
So what are the tools that we use to look at the same scriptures, the same words, and derive this sort of higher understanding of the philosophy?
Okay. The Vedanta philosophy that we discussed today was made into a compact spiritual philosophical system by Adi Shankaracharya in the 8th century. I am quoting his sentence, I shall explain in English. Shastram tu antyam pramanam, shastram tu ajnana nivartakam, na jnana pravartakam. I shall try to explain this. So the point is this. What is the place of scriptures or scriptural teachings or doctrines of philosophy in spiritual life? That's a subject of discussion. What he says, Shastra means scriptures. What it means is, see, scriptures do not take you to the highest experience. Scriptures help you to remove wrong conceptions, wrong ideas. So what's the role of this light? This light doesn't reveal this podium. This light removes darkness, which stands in the way of my seeing this object. Even if there was no light, this will be there. So far as I am concerned, the presence of this podium became obvious to me when the darkness, which was the obstacle, was removed. Like that, all scriptures are meant only for this relative purpose, removing wrong notions. They cannot take you to the highest experience. So, one of Shankaracharya's, the original exponent of Vedanta philosophy is this: Srutya Yuktya Swanubhutya. What means? First you listen to scriptures, and then you use your brain, your logical analysis, and what is appealing to your intellect, your reason, you accept. The rest you reject. That's what Vedanta says. And then he says, don't stop there. Make it part of your experience. Swanubhuti means one's own inner experience. So, one unique aspect of Vedanta is its foundation is your own inner experience, not your faith. By believing in Vedanta, you don't become a Vedanti. By experiencing Vedanta teachings, you become a Vedanti. So, this experience can be found in the lives and teachings of many teachers who did not belong to Hindu religion or India, who different traditions you find. Wherever a great saint or a mystic is speaking about some higher inner experience which expresses in the form of universal humanism, love for the whole humanity, unselfishness, purity, that is Vedanta. That could be found in all traditions. Now this will be acceptable in modern times. That's what makes Vedanta the paradigm for our times. Yeah.
I guess to follow up on the last
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
In that sense, what scriptures specifically would you call as the foundational scriptures of Vedanta?
In fact, you raised this question of Swarga. I'm coming to that. It's related to that. So you find in Vedanta, Vedic scriptures, you find some ideas of rituals performed with the purpose of attaining heaven, are mentioned in many of the scriptures. Now, like that, you find in the scriptures many ideas which are sometimes divisive, irrational. Shankaracharya says, use your brain, your rational, yuktya, rational analysis. So, there are many teachings, for example, in the Vedic scripture, not Vedantic, but rather Vedic scripture, like Samhita, Brahmana and Aranyakas you find, which may be a legacy of the socio-anthropological conditions of those times. See, if you read the parables, biblical parables, the stories, the Samaritan, the sower of the seed, all these parables are taken from the pastoral society of Middle East in those days, culturally from Jewish tradition. So that's part of the parable. So also in Vedic scriptures, there are many things taken from the old Indian, the Aryan Vedic tribal traditions. All of them are not highly philosophical or universal. Many of them may not have any relevance to our times, and Shankaracharya says you should reject them. So in the Upanishad, you can write your own commentary if you want. Vedic statements are not revelations from a god. Rather, you become a Vedantin when you transcend, when you go beyond words. Words are necessary, but beyond words there is experience. And experience is the ultimate, the final deciding criterion in Vedantic spiritual evolution. As for heaven, you have to remember, Vedantic heaven, the Mimamsa philosophy, incidentally I am mentioning this. The word Swarga or heaven mentioned in the Mimamsa tradition is technically different from its equivalent in the Judo-Christian tradition. In Christian tradition, heaven has got a spiritual element in it. You feel the presence of God, angels are all around it. But in Vedic concept of Swarga, it is just a 5-star hotel where you live for a long time only to return after some time. It is only mythological concept. And Vedantic philosophers like Shankaracharya don't take them very seriously. If you have taken this seriously, then Vedanta would not be universal spiritual paradigm. It is only, it's part of the burden of the socio-anthropological landscape of those times. We're coming to that. Please come.
So you were just mentioning about how you have to read all, when you read the Vedas scriptures, these are all based on societal settings, so unless you want it, you reject it. But how about things like Gita, where they're all words of God, let's say, and where you may not necessarily feel you want to accept that, like a simple thing, Sarvadharman Parityajya, leave everything and come and take my shelter, for example.
2 points I mentioned. Okay. Now, Gita is considered to be more or less on the same status as the Vedas. Second point, the last sentence that Lord Krishna makes in Gita in the 18th chapter is, that is, Kachideda Sudam Partha Toya Egagrena Chetasa Kachidajnana Sammoha Runasaste Dhananjaya. So Lord Krishna says this. Then Lord Krishna also says, Vimursya edad aseshena yathechasi tatha kuru. That's the last statement he makes. Edad aseshena vimursya tum yatha ichasi tatha kuru. What it means, I have taught you all these great things. Now, you use your brain, your reasoning power, and whatever is appealing to your reason, that is what you have to accept. Really speaking, what you feel at home with, that's what you are fit for. Really. When you read a book, if you are highly attracted, if you feel the passage, if you don't feel the passage of time, if you forget time, when you are reading a book, that's a book that attracts you. That's what the book that you are at home with. So Lord Krishna says, that is, Vimursya edad aseshena. You completely, thoroughly analyze what I taught you, and then whatever is acceptable to you, you accept and practice. That's the last statement. Then you mentioned Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Bhaja Ahamtva Sarva Papebhyo Mokshishyami. So this is the 66th verse of the 18th chapter. Actually, the statement I quoted earlier must come to the end of it. 66, after making the statement, you give up all your concerns and you take refuge in me, then I shall protect you. After making the statement, Lord Krishna says, don't take me very seriously if I don't appeal to your ideas. So you can imagine. Now about the statement, little explanation is necessary. What Lord Krishna says is, if you have a devotional bent of mind, and let's say if you pray to a particular idea of God, and you are truly devoted, lead a pure life, then if you surrender yourself, resign yourself to the will of that God, then that resignation, it may be Jesus Christ for a Christian, maybe for Buddha, for a Buddhist, or different ideas of God, Hindu tradition, whatever may be. If the resignation is complete and thorough, then what happens, you need not have any concern for it. It's a kind of inner spiritual journey. But after making this statement, Lord Krishna says, you listen to me carefully, Vimursya edad aseshena yathesya thakur. I have taught you this. Now, if it appeals to your logic, you accept and do whatever you want. Yathesya thakur means do whatever you want. That the last teachings of Lord Krishna is, do like this, no. I have taught you, I have put all these ideas before you. Now you do whatever you want. Total freedom of action. Now the point is, once you are spiritually evolved, once you are convinced of certain ideas, when they come from a teacher, when you are sincere and honest, then you won't do something else. A child who is convinced that what he is doing is not right, then you do whatever you want. If you tell, he won't repeat the same mistake. After taking Arjuna out of his ignorance and delusion, Lord Krishna says, now do whatever you want. And he did exactly what Lord Krishna actually. There is no indoctrination in that. So, okay. You wanted to ask some yeah.
Swami, so one of the pramanas on which Vedanta is built is the Shabda Pramana, right?
Yeah.
It is at some level to follow tradition, because there's a lot of Vedantic knowledge which has been passed on before that. So when we decide to go on the path of logic, when do we decide that fine, this bit of tradition is something I can do away with, while this bit of tradition is something I need to keep.
Very good. It takes you to Hindu hermeneutics and epistemology. Now, there are 6 pramanas in Advaita Vedanta. You know, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, Artha, and Upalabdhi. Now, the highest experience in Vedanta is called Sarva Pramana Avadhi. Thus, Praman, Sarva Pramana Nishedha. What is Avadhi? Avadhi is a limit. Pramanas cannot take you to experience. Pramanas can only take you to Prameya. So, if you have studied Chadasutri, there is Hindu Chadasutri, Shankaracharya says, Aham Brahmasmi, that Mahavakya is explained. I am that Brahman, all pervading Brahman. Then Shankaracharya says, this Aham Brahmasmi, even when you are convinced of it, it is only penultimate state. Aham Brahmasmi Mahavakya is one step below Aham Brahmasmi Anubhuti. When you reach Anubhuti, silence is language. That's why she saw the Amalanandiyam or the Kalpaturu Parimala, they all quote one statement from Yajurveda, that is Antaya Bhuvadinam Anantaya Mukam. The language of the finite is verbosity, the language of the infinite is silence. What is infinite? Experience. So Aham Brahmasmi experience comes after Aham Brahmasmi conviction. It's clear to you? So it's called Pramana is accepted. Pramana is only meant to save you from taking the wrong direction. Pramanas will take you in the right direction. Pramanas will not make you reach your destination. So it's called Sarva Pramana Nishedha, Sarva Pramana Avadhi, Pancha Shabda Pravritti Nishedha. Okay? I need not explain. Something related to epistemology which may be beyond the scope. You can come to Vedanta Society and be happy. I'll be very happy, and really it's a great joy for me to see here in this modern university students who are interested in the traditional Vedantic epistemology, Pramana Shastra. Thank you. I was teaching all this for years. For the first time somebody is asking a question like this. Okay. Yeah, any more? So, silence is the language of the highest experience, conviction. Okay.
Thank you so much.